Hello everybody, my name is Walter and this is episode 15 of my Redstone Commands Series. In this episode I want to talk about the two most basic commands when you're dealing with entities, which are the summon and the kill command. So what are these two commands actually about? Well, the summon command, as the name implies, is used to create a single entity in the world, which works fine for pretty much all types of entities except for players for obvious reasons. On the other hand, we have the kill command, which does the opposite, so it removes entities from the game by applying an insane amount of damage. And I'm talking about a truly insane amount of damage here. If you really want to survive a kill command, you would have to abuse commands to get more life and armor points than that, although you would still get the damage though. Rather, more interesting is the fact that if you use the kill command to deal with mobs, they tend to drop the loot. Or if you're dealing with slimes, they will likely, well, if they are the bigger slimes at least, break down into the smaller slimes. So you may have to repeat the kill command a few more times if you truly want to clean out an area. And with that, let's actually get to the syntax of the summon command. So this is pretty straightforward. We start again with the name of the command, summon. Then we need to specify what type of entity we want to summon, just the type. The NBT data comes a bit later in this command, which is the main difference if you compare it to the setBlock command. After the entity type, you define where you want to place that entity. If you don't give a position, the entity will be placed wherever the command is executed from, which is generally the position of the player. So maybe at the position if you summon in a creep also. And lastly, you can finally add potential NBT data the entity would have from the very beginning then. This follows the normal syntax, so fancy brackets on the outside and then the actual NBT data on the inside. I already explained this in great detail in the previous episode. There is one special case concerning the position, and that is if the x-coordinate is an integer, so a whole number, the game will automatically add 0.5 to it. The same is true for the z-coordinate. The reason is pretty simple. Let's say I want to summon an entity on top of this block here. What I usually would have to do without this would be get the position of this block, which I can get with the F3 menu, then add 0.5 to the x and the z coordinate, since those coordinates are actually the lower northwest corner of this block. So 0.5 to those two, and 1 to the y coordinate. But since this is such a common occurrence, usually you want the entity to be placed on the middle of a block and not on top of a corner, the game will automatically do it if you just give it whole numbers. If you actually want to place it on top of an edge or a corner, you would have to, in this instance, for example, have minus 14 point or minus 14.0. So you have to specifically tell the game, okay, I actually want to place it on this edge or corner. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's actually get to the examples. So my first example I choose here is specifically showing you this adding of 0.5 to the x and z coordinates. So what I'm summoning here is a creeper at the coordinates of the block in front of me with just 1 added to the y coordinate. So it's summoned on top of the block and not inside of it. And in this instance would fall through. I'm also adding some NBT data here, the creeper specific powered state, which in this case means the creeper is a powered creeper. And I'm also adding a custom name, which is the name you can give an entity using the name tag, which in this instance, since it's Dinnerbone, means that the entity is upside down. And you can see exactly what I had in the command right in front of you. So summon on top of the block, charged, and called Dinnerbone. So that's the first example. Second example, now we're working with relative world coordinates. So if I'm not standing right on the middle of a block, but on the side of it, it would actually be summoned also on the side of the block over there. Now, this is an armor stand, and the most important NBT data here, or the one I want to specifically talk about, is the tags NBT data. So this is a list that contains the tags that can be changed using the tag command, but can also be added in the beginning using the summon command, as you can see here. Now, this is extremely useful if you need a unique entity for your data pack, for example. Sometimes you have a data pack and you need some kind of local interaction point for the player to interact with. So let me quickly start the emulator here. And now if I get close to this armor stand, I will get a single message. And if I get further away and get close again, I get the same message again. So this could be some kind of interaction menu where I can actually change the settings of a data pack or access some of its functionality. Here it's just a simple clickable text that will give me one cookie. Turn this off again. Or sometimes you also need just a marker. You want to mark a certain position to do something later on in the data pack. And that's also where a unique entity is quite useful because you can address entities using the execute command and can change the position or the executor to that entity, which can be quite useful for many, many things in data packs. The area effect cloud can be used in a similar vein for data packs, but has one major difference, and that is that it has an inbuilt timeout. The duration is in game text how long this entity will exist. In this instance, since it's 100, means 5 seconds, 20 game ticks per second, so 5 seconds here. Now, why would you want that? Well, sometimes you need to, for example, step through a certain area and do something every step. And you do the same every step. So the simplest way is have an entity do the steps and then whatever needs to happen at the position of that entity. And just repeat and rinse and repeat until you are done with whatever you want to do. Now, this means that if the game crashes, for example, during that execution, or the data pack has some kind of error and stops the execution at that point, and you used armor stands, you would have now an out-of-place armor stand that isn't supposed to be there. And that could cause issues. So you would have to have some kind of algorithm running in the background that removes them again, or you would have to go manually in there and remove them. And all of that you can just not have to do by using something with an inbuilt timeout. So most effective here is the area effect cloud. You could also use prime TNT, although that has some other problems, as you might imagine. Anyway, that's the area effect cloud. And then lastly, I have TNT. Now, this is an example I wanted to show you that sometimes you need to add NBT data. In all of those instances here, it was more or less optional. You could also still add it later on with other commands. But for prime TNT, you need to add it. Because fuse is in game text how long that entity has until it explodes. And the default value is 0. So if you don't specify it, that TNT will explode in your face directly the moment it's summoned. And that's usually not what you want with that. So here, fuse 40, so 2 seconds. 1, 2, and then explosion, as you can see. So sometimes you actually need some NPT data. And with that, it's time for the syntax of the kill command, which is very simple, as you can see here. It's just the name of the command kill and then optionally the targets. I'm saying optionally, but if you don't specify a target, it's basically suicide since the kill command will then execute whoever is executing the kill command. Nice sentence. Anyway, basically suicide, as I said. Now, what are valid targets? Well, it can be just a player name. It can also be the unique identifier of an entity, which you get if you look at an entity and use the autocomplete function. And then you can see inside of this list here usually a very long string of numbers and letters, which is the unique ID of that entity. Can be quite useful if you want to deal with a wandering trader, for example, that decided to spawn inside of your base or whatever. But more commonly used are target selectors. And when you're using target selectors, you're usually also using filter arguments for those. And as part of those filter arguments, you can also use entity type tags and so on and so on. So you can get very, very creative with that option. Now, at this point, I need to give you one very important warning. When you're using the kill command with target selectors, especially when you're talking about the all players or even worse, the all entity target selectors, always, always, always add filter arguments. Because you won't like what happens if you use the kill all entity command without any filtering. Because that would remove all players, all mobs, projectiles, items, mine carts, armor stands, item frames, boats, and so on. Everything would be wiped out. And be even more careful in triple, quadruple, and quintuple check before you add a kill command with a target selector in a repeating command block, because you can really wipe out a map and make it inhospitable to anyone. And only with external editor tools you would be able to make this map really livable again. So really careful with that. And now it's time for some examples for the kill command. The first example is something I have usually running in the background when I'm designing my bigger doors, which is a command that will kill all items that are within a certain distance, in this instance here 10 meters, and are of the type item. So basically I'm removing all items in a spherical area. This is rather useful if I'm designing redstone contraptions and accidentally break a block with redstone components attached to it. So let's say I have something like this and break this block, and I quickly get notified, okay, I have broken something, or if I'm testing out anything and somewhere hidden in the circuitry something breaks, I can actually get a real-time notification, okay, now something didn't work quite as it was supposed to. I'm basically just running this into a repeating command block down there. So I get a feedback if something breaks, and I also make sure that if something breaks, it doesn't fall into my hoppers and changes the timings involved or creates signals I don't want in my circuitry. So very, very useful for the redstoners. The next example here is an example where I wanted to show you that you can also kill anything that is not a specific type. So here, for example, you would kill everything within 2 meters that is not a player. If you run this for every player, you would basically have a kind of invincibility of the player, since no projectile will be able to reach the player and no mob will be able to reach the player. But the player will also not be able to deal with any entities in a direct manner. Just a quick example there. The next example here is to show you that you can also very easily kill specifically tagged entities. So if you remember from the summoning part earlier, I had a armor stand that had the tag tagged. And here I'm specifically looking for the kill of an entity that is within 10 meters, an armor stand, and has the tag tagged. And as soon as I do that, you can see this armor stand disappears. So as I said, with the summon command, tagging entities is very useful to make them truly unique, which can make addressing them later on with target selectors much easier. And the last example is something you might want to run in the background when you're working on TNT-heavy contraptions, like TNT cannons and so on, and you're not at the point where you actually want to test anything. And that's here would be a command that removes all prime TNT from the game. Run this in a repeating command block, like in this one down here, and you can make sure that even if you accidentally trigger something, you won't have to load an older version or have to rebuild anything. As you can see, I can try to summon in something, but the moment it's summoned in, it gets killed. Can be quite useful, and this is by far not everything you can do with a kill command. And with that, we have reached the end of this episode about the summon and the kill command. I hope you enjoyed it, and well, see ya!